Steven here, and I'm still taking you through the process of how I created a mana bar mod, which lets you shoot fireballs, and it depletes your mana whenever you do so. And we've gotten pretty far. We have it so it's shooting fireballs already, and we have it so it's displaying a mana bar. And I just want to point out, as I've done so in the last few videos, you notice that my process is not linear. It's not like I write every single line, line by line, in order, and then it's done. That is just not ever how you write code. It's not how anybody writes code. You notice that we kind of skipped around. At one point, I forgot to put this background color transparent, and I had to put it back in, and I forgot about the fact that I needed this library, and I had to put that in, so, that's several times I had to jump back to the beginning and put things in there, and that is just how it works. That's exactly how you should be programming. So if you notice that you're not writing code line by line by line, good, you're doing it right. So let's get it to shoot the fireball in the direction we're facing instead of this hard-coded direction down the x-axis. What we have to do is get some information out of the game of Minecraft and into the web page. We need Minecraft to tell us basically where the player is pointing. And so there's this function called onGameStateResponse, which gives a response that tells you a bunch of information about the game. Actually, let's print that information out using the trick from before. Test HTML, and then I'm going to actually turn this response into a string with a JSON stringify command. You don't have to remember this. Yeah, actually, don't worry about remembering JSON stringify if you don't do a lot of JavaScript coding. This isn't like super important. But what I would like you to remember is the fact that, I've actually written some code here that isn't even going to be there in the final product. That happens a lot. I put some code, this little test div, and this thing that's going to print into that test div. That's something that's not going to even be there. We're going to delete that later, but I'm using it now to help test things. And coding is a series of experiments, and so this helps us run some experiments. So let's see what happens here. And I think I'm going to spoil it by telling you nothing will happen. So I don't see anything getting printed out. Now the reason that nothing gets printed out is that we actually have to ask Minecraft to call this function. It's not going to call it just whenever it feels like it. We have to say, please call this function. And the way we do that is by calling this function first. So we say mc ask for game state. Whenever we call that, it will, whenever Minecraft feels like it, after we call this, it'll call this function. It may be right after, maybe a little bit later, depending on like the lag and how much is going on in the game. So we're going to actually ask Minecraft to give us the game state repeatedly. We're going to set an interval. And in that interval, we're going to ask for the game state. So I'm going to make a little function here. The function is going to ask for the game state, and that's going to be inside this interval that is going to run every 1 second. So this is a snippet of code that actually is pretty useful. It's a way to make something happen over and over again. So every 1 second, we're going to ask for the game state. So roughly every 1 second, Minecraft will respond by calling this function. So now we should see something get printed out. There it is. So we see a bunch of stuff getting printed out there. Hopefully you can read that. It says player, and it says the last reported X position, last reported Y position, etc., etc. Tells you the name of the player. What's important here for us, though, is this forward. So it says forward, and then it gives an X and a Y and a Z for what's called the forward vector for the player. So that's going to be the direction that we want to shoot the fireball. So let's do that in here. So actually not in on game state response, but in when we shoot our fireball, that's when we're going to plug in the direction into each of these X, Y, Z places. So let me make some variables. Var dir x is going to be, actually, so we need to save this response. Every time Minecraft gives us a game state response, we should save it. So let's say last response equals response. So every time this function gets called, we're going to save into a variable called var last response. So this whole chunk of code right here, let me comment that all of this is for saving game state from Minecraft on a 1-second timer. So we have a variable last response. We're going to set a timer that asks for the game state every 1 second, and then this function gets called roughly every 1 second. This response is what comes from Minecraft. We're going to save that into last response, which is a global variable, so we can use it here in this function. So last response, and we're going to use player. I can see the structure of this right here. It's a big object. Player is the top level object. It's a little hard to see, but inside of player there's a forward object, and inside of that is the x, y, and the z coordinate. So it's player, forward, and then x coord. And I'm going to copy paste that for y and z, and then change this to y and z. And then we need to take those dir x, y, and z and plug them in to this command. So we take dir x, and that goes there. And then instead of this, we put in dir y. Oops, I left out the plus sign. And we take this one, and we put in dir y as well. No, not dir y as well. We put in dir z. So this, by the way, this is the second time I've done this, and I thought this would work. I really did. I was surprised that it didn't. So I'm trying to take you through my exact process from before. So let me just show you what happened here. So I'll refresh, and then I'll press F. And it gives an error down at the bottom. It says data parsing failed, unbalanced brackets, explosion power 0. And so here's our command, and everything looks okay. Direction. Here, it faded away. So let me do it again. Yeah, it says direction, and it's got a whole bunch of numbers right there, and the numbers are really long, and you notice it actually cuts off. So what we're running into here is the fact that Minecraft has a limit on how long the commands can be, and since those numbers are just ridiculously long, it makes the command too long. So we actually have to shorten up those numbers. So that's just something that surprised me, and that's exactly something that's going to happen to you when you're coding. Is your code doesn't always work. You do something and you're like, wow, I thought that would work. It didn't, and you just have to fix it. So the way we can shorten these numbers actually is to do math.round on them. That'll kind of cut off everything after the decimal point. It'll round it to the nearest whole number. And this, if I remember correctly, also didn't quite work, but I thought it would. Let's see. So now we'll try rounding it. I'll press F here, try to shoot this pig. Yeah, nothing's happening. Is it shooting? Yeah, see, that's the thing though, is it is shooting, it's making the fireball, but it's hard to tell where it's going. It's like it's just going up in the air or something, or it's evaporating once it hits me or something like that. It's very hard to tell. But the way I fixed this problem was rounding was a little bit too dramatic. You lose a lot of information when you round. So what I'm going to actually do is round to the nearest 2 decimal places. So one trick to doing that is to multiply it times 100 before you round it. And then after you round it, you can divide by 100. And that will round those numbers to the nearest 2 decimal places. Let's try that. That's actually a really good trick to know, is how to round to 2 decimal places in JavaScript. I had to look it up. Okay, well, I heard it there. It's kind of working. What is going on, though? So it's shooting it. It just shot it there. Um, so what's happening now is it's spawning the fireball in, like, right on top of me. And so sometimes it collides with me and doesn't work. But it's actually working pretty well. Um, Notice that it's not exploding anything, and that's because we have the explosion power set to 0. Oh, actually, that explains why it didn't hurt that cow earlier. I hadn't realized it until just now. The explosion power is 0. If we set the explosion power to 1, then it'll work. Let's try that. So we'll refresh. And I'll press F here. Yeah, that worked. It just kind of glitched out and didn't display it. That's Minecraft for you, though. It doesn't always work perfectly. Yeah, cool. So now it's working. It's catching things on fire. I feel bad. I'm not going to shoot the bunny again. I still feel bad from earlier when I hit it for no reason. So I'll shoot it into the water, and yeah, works pretty well. Now, notice that it's spawning above me, about 3 blocks above me. If you set it to spawn on you, then it explodes too soon. It doesn't actually shoot out. Now, earlier I did some stuff so that it would spawn a little bit in front of me so that I could basically use my crosshairs to aim. It's hard to use your crosshairs to aim right now because the fireball starts on top of you. It eventually gets roughly to where your crosshairs are, but it's still hard to hit stuff. Like, let me try to hit that mushroom. Yeah, so I tried to hit the mushroom, but it landed up there. That's because this fireball's spawning above me. Now, I'm not actually going to fix that in this episode, just because it's not super interesting. I mean, the code's right here. You can always pause the game and look at it, or pause the video and look at it if you want to. But I want to get to the point where we're making the mana bar actually do something, because that's where that'll kind of complete the mod, and the rest is just polishing. So we'll come back in the next episode and make the mana bar actually respond when we fire the fireball.